you're thinking about having a baby, you're running your business and everything, going about life, but you're figuring out like, how does this fit into the picture? Can I do this? Is it possible? Who else has done this? If those are questions you have, stay tuned because I'm going to answer them. I am a mompreneur of 6 years who planned her own maternity leave. Thank you guys so much for tuning into my channel. I am Tonya Rapley, and this is my channel where I talk about all things motherhood, entrepreneurship, and owning a Shopify store. And today we're talking about planning for your maternity leave as an entrepreneur or when you're self-employed. Because it's something, there's a lot of discussion, especially here in the United States where I'm based, about maternity leave and the rights that women have and so forth, and the rights that families have, actually, paternity and maternity leave. So paternity and maternity leave. But there's not a lot of conversation unless you're within certain entrepreneur circles about what it looks like to take maternity leave as an entrepreneur or paternity leave as an entrepreneur. And so today I want to share a few things that I did in order to properly plan for my maternity leave. When I became an entrepreneur, I knew that I wanted to own my pregnancy. One of the reasons that I actually was interested in entrepreneurship was because I grew up in a military household wherein my mother was required to, show up for duty and everything else. And even if it meant that she wasn't able to be the present parent or be there for our moments. And I didn't want that to be a portion or an experience of my motherhood journey. And then I remember working at my job and I had a colleague who was pregnant and she was hiding her morning sickness. She was in a meeting and she was miserable being pregnant and sick and that first trimester. And I was like, ooh, I don't want to be on anybody else's clock. Whatever my body decides to do is what it does. And I want to make sure that I'm able to manage that experience and determine how I want to experience, not someone else and telling me how much time I have and everything else to just go through the stuff that women go through when we get pregnant. And so I knew then, okay, I need to think about entrepreneurship. That was in 2014. And I completely became self-employed in 2015. I was self-employed for 4 years before I decided to get pregnant with my son. And part of the reason that I wanted to wait is because I wanted to make sure we had a good handle on our health care. We had relocated to California. And so I wanted to make sure my husband and I were stable in our businesses before we decided to embark on the parenthood journey. And I wanted to make sure I had certain things set up in my business. So we went completely self-employed 2015, got pregnant with my son in 2019. You don't have to do this timeline. This is just what worked for me and worked for my planning process. My pregnancy, we planned it out and everything. And I wanted to make sure that it was as stressless as possible and mission accomplished because I had an awesome pregnancy. Okay, so here are the 3 things that I focused on when planning my maternity leave as an entrepreneur. The first one was my team. I wanted to make sure that I had a solid support team because I wasn't going to be able to answer emails as quickly and I wasn't going to be able to get back to people. There were certain things that still needed to flow and function, such as customer service and day-to-day tasks that I had already comfortably started to hand off before I decided to plan my maternity leave. So I was already properly delegating my business. And so if you're thinking, okay, now I want to start planning for maternity leave, then start delegating, start ensuring that you're able to hand off processes in your business and that you trust people. One of the last things I handed off was my social media. I was managing the MyFab Finance social media up until about May of 2019. Or May of 2018. And that's when my assistant was like, just hand it over, girl. Just hand it over. And at that time, me and my assistant had been working together for 2 years. So I trusted her completely. And it was another thing that was just time for me to delegate and let go of. But outside of having my virtual assistant, we also had someone who was managing the social media. We brought them in. We had a team of writers to write content. I also had a manager, and my manager was managing my brand partnerships and any other media inquiries or spokesperson opportunities. He was managing that to make sure that those conversations were flowing. So I had set my business up in a way where I just needed to kind of step in and fulfill responsibilities, or I needed to hand things off. One of the things I also did going into maternity leave that I don't necessarily recommend is I launched a book. I wrote my first book, The Money Manual, the year before. And so we were going into launch of releasing the book. And I had this aggressive tour schedule planned and everything else. I was going to go to like 9 cities and do all this stuff. And then boom, I get pregnant. And so I had to change that. And a lot of things had to go online. We did do a kickoff when I was at the top of my second trimester. And I still traveled throughout my pregnancy and so forth. Was still able to promote the book. It was intense getting it released, but I'm happy that we got it released while I was pregnant, because that became one of my passive revenue streams and continues to be one of my passive revenue streams, a book that I wrote 2 years ago. So I'm happy that we got it done, but in the moment, it was intense. And so we actually hired support as well to help with our Facebook ads, to scale up our mailing list and create a list of people who were enthusiastic about the book releasing and so forth. So that was someone else we brought onto the team during my maternity leave, was kind of to help with that book launch. But that was a temporary contractor. And we brought on a few other temporary contractors as well, which is something that you might do. It might not be a team member that you see keeping on, for the entire course of your business. It might just be someone who comes in to support while you're pregnant. And that's totally okay too. The next thing I did is I strengthened my passive revenue streams. As I mentioned, I talked about, releasing the book and so forth. That became a passive revenue stream. But we also created funnels in our business. So I'm not going to go into sales funnels at length, because I'm sure you can find plenty of videos on here about them. But we strengthened our sales funnels as well, so that it was driving to our passive revenue streams. So it's literally that money that you make while you're sleeping. It's that money that it's when you create something and it's making money for you without you working. Passive revenue, I always say this, passive revenue is active at first. Like, it took a lot to get that book launched, but now 2 years later, we're still earning revenue. And that's one of our revenue streams, is the book that's on Amazon, which is a bestseller. If you're thinking about getting your money together, I highly recommend checking it out. It's the Money Manual. I will make sure that I link it below. And also, while we're talking about links and stuff, make sure you like this video if this is helpful content for you, and subscribe if you care about things like with motherhood and all that stuff. But yeah, so we made sure that we were strengthening those passive revenue streams with the book, with the sales funnels leading to our online courses that we had created and so forth, so that we didn't have to work as hard to bring in revenue. And especially for me, I didn't have to work as hard to bring in revenue to cover the team that I had brought in to support me during that maternity leave, and that bills were still getting paid and everything else. Yes, I had money saved and money set aside, but the money I had saved and set aside wasn't specifically for the business. Even though I did have a business savings account, it was for the other things, like when my son arrived. And I'm so glad I had it, because there were so many expenses. I'm going to have to create a whole entire video about that, like the expenses that I did not anticipate as a new mother. Like, we ended up getting new furniture for our bedroom within 1 week of my son being born. So, a lot of money. But I wanted to make sure we had the passive revenue stream so the business could be sustaining and so forth. So that's another thing I did, was build those passive revenue streams. So if you don't have those in your business and you're thinking about going on a maternity leave, I highly recommend going to Pinterest. Pinterest is a great resource to find different passive revenue streams and so forth, and figuring out what you can add to your business that will help you make more money in the event that you're not able to work, or that you're looking to shift the way in which you generate revenue for your business. The next is I really made sure that we were clear. So I guess number 3 is making sure that I'm clear on like team responsibilities. This kind of doubles into team, but then it doesn't, because there was one point person. So my assistant was my one point person. So that meant that everyone went to her before they came to me. And that was really important during my maternity leave, because usually, even though my assistant, was the point person for my inbox, people would still text me, they would reach out, they would DM me and so forth, and try to get in contact with me different ways. And me being the person who I am, who got into entrepreneurship to help people, would respond to those inquiries and so forth. But I really had to be disciplined and say, no, this is a person that you go through to get to me. So my assistant she had access to my inbox, which she always did. But then so that released the need for me to go into my inbox. So if there was something that was pressing, she would text me, because everyone knew, we set up an autoresponder that you need to reach out to who my assistant was at the time. You need to reach out to my assistant to get in contact with me. And she could text me if there was anything urgent and so forth. But then everyone else on the team knew that she was the point person to reach out to her first before getting in contact with me. That way I was just able to manage the flow of communication. And we also were able to hold each other accountable. Like, if there was something that I didn't do or so forth, she was able to hold me accountable. And then I would check in with her, so she knew that she was responsible for a lot more than she previously had been. So that it was really important for us to establish a hierarchy for our team and communicate that internally and externally. The next is I determined what kind of schedule I wanted to have during my maternity leave. So, ideally, I wouldn't have done any work at all, but I don't even know if that's in my makeup not to do any work at all. Like, I think I literally was still sending off and like posting content while I was in labor. I remember a client being like, hey, it's going up today. Yes, the content went up, so and so and so, but I'm in labor. So if you don't hear from me, and they're like, oh my God, you're in labor. But yeah, so I definitely knew that I was going to work a certain amount, but I really needed to create a schedule for myself. And so I only would sign on 2 days a week. I didn't know what to expect as a new mom, but I wanted to be prepared for whatever. And so I said, I'm going to sign on 2 days a week. My days of the week to sign on are Monday and Thursday. I will check in to see what's going on, respond to anything that demands my attention, and complete any task and so forth that might demand my attention. And that allowed me to schedule with my husband as well, so that he knew these are Tonya's work days. Like, I need to make sure that I'm supporting her, or we have some type of coverage at this time or these times, or maybe I'm not taking any jobs on these days because these are Tanya's days, or maybe I'm seeing if clients have flexibility. But it was important for me to communicate that to everyone around me so they knew when I'd be available and knew when I was going to be working and dedicating time to working. And for me too, so I knew that, okay, Tonya, you're going to be checking in, you're going to, lock in and do some work at this time, make sure that the baby has what he needs and so forth. But it also kind of became my time to connect to my essence of who I am. I won't say that work is all that I do, but in the same sense, work as a self-employed individual is an important component of what I do. And as a mom, it's very easy to lose yourself. As a new mom, it's very easy to lose yourself. And so having that schedule also allowed me to have some sense of normalcy and kind of lock into something else other than the anxiety I was having around oh my gosh, is he sleeping on his stomach through the night? Oh my God, all that anxiety that I had, it allowed me to kind of detach from that and focus on something else. So it actually was good for me to do some work. But if you feel like you don't want to work at all, it's totally okay. Just clearly communicate and create a schedule for yourself, or say there ain't no schedule because I ain't doing nothing. But you might want to have some type of work schedule if you plan to create or finish tasks. And I will say, I was completely offline. So I had my son on November 22nd. I was completely offline until the second week of January. And I did not travel for work until May. I thought I was going to go back and travel until in March. And I remember telling a friend yeah, I'm just going to take November through March off. She's like, Tonya, that ain't hardly no time. And I was like, girl, I'll be fine. And then I looked at him and he was so perfect. And I was like, I ain't going back. I can't leave this little person. And I didn't. Even when I went back to work traveling in May, I took my son with me because I was also nursing. And it was also very important for me to talk and communicate with clients and let them know that hey, I am nursing and my son travels with me. Is there a space where I will be able to nurse? I will need to take breaks during filming and everything else. And that's one of the good things about being established as a business owner before, or even if you're an influencer and you have brand partnerships and so forth. That's one of the good things about being established before you go on a maternity leave, because you can make some sort of demands because you have some sort of leverage because people want to work with you. And so that was also very important for me. So the clear schedule, but being also very clear about what I wanted my post-maternity leave to look like, what I wanted things to look like when I returned to set and returned to recording, and what I wanted things to look like in my home life, and etc. We ended up bringing in a nanny when Karis was about 3 months old so that I could get work done in the house. Because even though I wasn't traveling, I was still doing work, and my work was still cranking back up because bills got to be paid. So we brought in an in-home nanny, but we were very clear on what we needed to support us during that time, and very clear on the time that we had available to parent and the time we had available for our businesses. And those are a few things that I did to properly plan for maternity leave. Yes, we did save money, but this isn't a financial thing. This is more so a productivity video and so forth. If you want to hear more about how we financially prepared for maternity leave, then definitely let me know. I can answer those questions. I also wrote a book, Financially Preparing for a Baby. So that book is also available. I have linked to that below too if you have financial questions around the planning process. But yeah, I hope you found this video helpful. If you found this helpful, watch my other videos. Make sure that you comment, let me know below what are some of your concerns about planning for maternity leave. I answer the questions in the comments. So if you have any questions, ask them. But it really was about planning. planning. And as someone who doesn't necessarily pride herself on a planner, I feel like that's some of the most planning that I've ever done in my life, because it literally started almost 4 years. It started 4 years before I had him. And then we spent that entire year planning, found out I was pregnant in March, gave birth to him in November. So I had the whole year ahead of us and so forth. And I stopped traveling. Actually, for anyone who wants to know, I stopped traveling in September, but I was still taking local work and so forth. And then I was officially down and done when we hit November, because then we were officially on baby watch. He was due November 29th. I had him on November 22nd. So at the top of November, I was officially on baby watch, and we just waited for Mr. Karras to come into this world and change everything. And then we had him, everything changed. We had a sense of normalcy, and then a pandemic happened. And we're still changing, we're still evolving, we're still flowing, we're still here recording videos and serving you content and so forth. So again, I hope you enjoyed this video. I look forward to connecting you and giving you more content that is valuable, that helps you operate in this world, in your purpose, in your zone of genius, whether it's a mompreneur, an entrepreneur, a mother, or a Shopify store owner, whatever it may be. Thank you so much for watching. Be passionate, be profitable, and I'll see you next time.